What's up, boys? We're gonna be doing a complete wolfbow guide today. This video is more catered toward the endgame wolfbow, especially when you do unlock the level 80 gear. If you're looking for a written out version of this guide, I do have a full Google Doc written out with a majority of the thing covered in this video. But this video will probably cover slightly more stuff in detail just because it's easier for me to make a video than to write a Google Doc. So with that being said, let's get started. As always, I stream regularly on Twitch, and if you do have questions, you can ask me there. Be sure to subscribe to the video. Let's get started. Let's start off and do a quick recap of the skills. The 4 expertise skills we're taking is Torrent Valley, Arrow Rain, Wild Call, and Focus. However, in terms of leveling priority, definitely level Bullseye first to tier 6. This is the most important skills by far. The reason why this is the most important skills to level is because this is what your wolf is going to scale off. If you look at the talent, you can see that basic attack is actually what your wild wolf is scaled off, including its coordinated attack. It's actually scaled off your basic attack level, so leveling the basic attack first is going to be by far the most important. Storm Arrow contribute to about 7% of your damage, which is going to be the thing we level next. There's argument to level Wild Call as well as Focus, but as far as I know, the Wild Call only boosts the basic attack for the wolf. Since you're going to be mostly doing coordinated attack in the late game, I think Wild Call is not too important to level early. The same kind of go with Focus. Focus only buffed the haste. Imagi wise, prioritize getting the Muku Skull to tier 5, and then you also have the Bandit Skull as your secondary Imagi. These are both really good Imagi, as the Muku Skull give attack % bonus, while the Bandit Skull give agility % bonus. If you're able to get the Muku Chef to tier 3 or higher, you can use it to replace the Bandit Skulls, and that will be my only recommendation. The reason why we want Muku Chef, even though we don't really use crit that well, is because of the crit damage. Muku Chef just gives crit damage, and because our wolf already guaranteed to crit, the crit damage scaling is still very good. So you always want to prioritize getting the Muku Chef if possible for your gold tier Imagi. It's not ever worth chasing other Imagi, even if you pay to win, because the gap between Muku Skull to something like a Spider tier 5 or even the Goblin King tier 5 is very minimal. I heard it's only at best like a 1% damage increase from going from the Muku Skull tier 5 to a Spider tier 5, so you don't ever go for this. Let's talk about stat priority. Early game wise, you can focus on just getting Mastery and Haste, which are the 2 recommended stats. However, when you hit late game, when you get that level 80 gear, you actually do not build Haste on your gear set. This is one of the most common mistakes that people make. The reason is because Agility, which is our main stat that increases the attack, also already increase Haste. So you don't have to build any extra Haste on your gear advanced attributes, since you're able to get majority of your Haste from the Agility already. So doing more Haste is a mistake. Generally, the breakpoint we're looking for is going to be 46% attacks. But there's a secondary reason why you do not want Haste, and that is because Haste additionally also increase cast speed. Cast speed is a horrible stat on Wolfbow. It actually grieves your DPS because it makes your torrent duration slower. If I summon a eagle right now and I bomb Haste, the torrent have a faster cast time, therefore it extends your photon state less, and it also grieve your rotation. Crit. You don't want to build crit if possible because your wolf and other things is already guaranteed to do critical damage, and the crit only increases the crit chance, so as a result you don't want to build crit if possible. Haste, we talked about, you don't explicitly build Haste, it's already come from Agility. At most, you can build a little bit of Haste, especially at the early game, to get to that 46% attack speed breakpoint. Luck is a fine stat. It's more like a filler stat if you can avoid. However, Mastery and Versatility is going to be our main focus. Mastery is of course going to be our main focus. This is the stat that boosts your wolf damage, your pet damage, which is the majority of where your damage comes from. Every 1 point of Mastery boosts it by 2.75%. However, the reason why you don't only focus on Mastery is because your own characters still do damage. Mastery only empower your pet, so there's a discount to it. Your wolf does about 70 to 75% of your damage, so this here has a 75% scaling discount because it's unable to boost the rest of the 25% of the damage coming from your actual characters doing damage, specifically from Storm Arrow and stuff like that. Now, what is the thing that's different from Wolfbow to other class is that Mastery provide pet damage instead of elemental damage. Pet damage, unfortunately, is an additive source to other damage % like range damage, boss damage, and stuff like that, which make the pet damage a very poor stat, and it doesn't scale really well into late game, and it's one of the unfortunate downfall of Wolfbow. and why it doesn't scale that well with stats. And it's also why you focus on versatility more and more and more as you approach late game, just because when you have so much damage percent stat, that versatility end up being better. As a result, versatility is going to be the main stat we end up focusing on after mastery. You want to ideally build mastery to a versatility in closer to like a 2-to-1 ratio. So every 2% of mastery, try to look for 1% of versatility in the perfect world where you can allocate for perfect stat and like that. Versatility is a separate damage multiplier in case you didn't know that, which is why it is very, very important for almost every single class to build. This is the current talent page that I'm using. For the most part, it should be very self-explanatory other than a few specific notes that I'll now point out. The first step is that we don't take this bleed note because we just don't have enough points. The bleed does very, very little damage and it's not really worth it. The only reason we do bleed is to proc this talent, where for each additional source of bleed, you do 3% damage to it. Something about the bleed in this game or on wolfbow is that they are counted separately. So like this bleed, for example, is considered a separate instance than the light secret arrow bleed, and this is just better and easier, right? So when I say for each additional bleed effect, it means like how many different ways you can apply bleed, and in totals, not including the dire wolf bites, we have 3 ways to apply bleed, which make this talent do a 9% additional damage for our wolf. If we're able to get this, then it'll be 12% because there's 4 bleed in total, but because we don't take this, there's only a 9% damage bonus here. Right, most of the other notes should be pretty self-explanatory. Like we're just looking for note that give us damage. Pet deal 15% more damage to elite or stronger enemies. Wolf deal additionally 30% damage to enemy that are like 35% HP and lower. Something to be aware is that when you are doing damage parts in your guild here, because the dummy is always under 35% HP, your damage parts actually get inflated a lot because of the note right here. Since this will always proc when you're doing damage parts in the guild house, but it's not going to be the case when you're doing an actual fight. So something to be aware of in case you're a parser. The most common question people have is why do we not take this Arrow of Light nodes where it make the Arrow Rain and Light Seeker guaranteed to do crit damage? And the reason is because these two skills are just worth very, very little in terms of your overall DPS proportions. So it's not really worth it to take this compared to taking something else that just like guarantee you your wolf to do more damage and stuff like that. Let's go over the skills, right? Storm Arrow and Basic Attack, I think are pretty self-explanatory. You just spam Storm Arrow whenever off cooldown to build Photon Gauge, and when you're max gauge, just do Storm Arrow to spam to do the wolf coordinated attack. Let's go over the specific detail and tips and tricks for the skills. Starting off with Torrent Valley. Obviously, Torrent Valley is the skills you want to use when you're in your overdrive photon mode, because it pauses the recovery and gives you some stat back. You want to use this when you're under 76 photon, just so that you can maximize the benefit. Now, the reason why attack speed is bad is because when you have too high attack speed, your Torrent Valley is going to attack faster, therefore reducing the amount of time you spend in photon. There's a specific torrent stack mechanics where for every second you spend in photon, you get 1 stack. So we want to maximize the amount of time you spend in photon as much as possible so that you can get to that 30 stacks, which give you the Lumi Torrent skills. The Lumi Torrent skills is a special skill that you get after you unlock the corresponding talent node. Basically, the way it works is that when you have 30 stacks, your Torrent become this special Lumi Torrent skills. You just cast it and you instantly get 120 stacks. And then you can enter your overdrive like this again. Try not to cast Arrow Wing while you're in overdrive. I know it's very tempting to cast it because it recovers your gauge, but when you cast Arrow Rain during overdrive, you see that your wolf will start doing tail swipe instead, which is very, very good for AoE, but very poor for single target damage. You don't want your wolf to be doing the tail swipe, so avoid casting the Arrow Rain during overdrive. For the most part, the Arrow Rain should only be used outside of overdrive so you can recover the photon energy as fast as possible, unless you're in AoE. In AoE situation, you can keep on spamming the Arrow Rain because it will continuously reduce your Arrow Rain cooldown by spamming a bunch of Phantom Wolf. Make sure that the mob is tightly grouped on top of each other so that your Wolf Tail Swipe can hit every single mob. This is one of the reasons why Wolfbow actually have really strong AoE, is because the Tail Swipe can hit every mob and then it reduces the Arrow Rain cooldown to like 0 instant. Wildcall. Wildcall obviously summon you a wolf. In late game, you are able to get permanent uptime. But the most important thing about Wildcall is that when you do unlock the talent node, it will summon additional creatures. Either it's going to be the boar or the eagle. Now this here is the most RNG and the most 50-50 aspect of wolfbow, because if you summon an eagle, you're like straight cooked. The eagle increase haste, which after you hit 46% attack speed is completely useless because you can't do more than 14 storm arrow on your rotation. So the haste is completely useless after you have hit the breakpoint. So you're always hoping for the board to get that 50% light damage. If you get the eagle, your damage is straight up like go down, and if you get the board, your damage is straight up like increased by a lot. So this is like a straight 50-50 RNG. What make it worse, and something you have to be super careful about, as I've talked about, is that having higher haste, having attack speed, is actually a negative return because it reduces the duration of your torrent. You can see that I summoned the eagle here, and now my torrent attacks super fast, and it reduced my duration I can to stay in the overdrive. So if you summoned the eagle and then you torrent, you actually can lose torrent stacks, and as a result, you might not be able to get to 30 stack as fast and lose out on a bunch of damage for missing a rotation. So if possible, always torrent first before you wild call, so that you don't get stuck with the eagle and then you cry. This becomes worse when you somehow stack the eagle and the focus together, because the focus also gives you haste. Now the focus obviously is just used to reduce the cooldown of your special attack by 50%, reduce the cooldown of your storm arrow. Finally, your ultimate. As a marksman, obviously your ult is very good at grouping, and it also applies vulnerability. But the thing is that the ult is actually not worth using because the vulnerability buff is not good enough, and I think it doesn't stack with the rest of the party vulnerability buff, like if you already have a hive mind. But most importantly is that it has a very long cast time and a very long animation for almost no benefit. So as a result, usually you don't use your ult at all unless there is no vulnerability in your party. Let's talk about basic wolfbow rotation, because you can play the game entirely on auto. You can just toggle every single skills except your ults and your imagis, then you'll be good to go. You don't want to cast your imagi during your burst, so therefore ideally you turn off auto, cast your imagi manually, and then you turn auto back on before your burst again. So to not interrupt your burst sequence. However, if you want to play on a more optimal way, then I can suggest you to play semi-auto by putting the torrent skills as well as the rain of arrow skills, maybe even focus off the auto mode, and then follow the following rule of thumbs. So I'm gonna do it like this. Obviously start with your imagi, enter auto, and then when you're in overdrive mode, do not cast your rain of arrow, and when your gauge is like low enough, about under 76, then you can cast your torrent valley, right? Once you're out of overdrive, cast rain of arrows to get your gauge back until you basically just repeat. And this is the basic semi-manual rotation for wolfbow, right? Coming into the gauge again, I don't have the torrent valley up, so it's fine. Like, I would just wait. But again, like, don't make the mistakes of casting rain of arrows when you are in overdrive mode, so that your wolf do not do tail swipe. Right, coming in and then start to do my overdrive, the gauge will go down, torrent valley. If your stacks is very close to 30 already, you don't have to cast the torrent valley just because you're gonna get the enhanced Lumi here anyway. And then when your gauge is 0, cast the enhanced Lumi. Again, make sure you don't cast rain of arrow when you're in overdrive, just to avoid your wolf doing the tail swipe attack. And then you can cast arrow of rain once you're outside of it. Let's talk about the non-auto rotation, because if you really want to optimize your wolfbow gameplay damage, there's a specific talent that you have to pay attention to, and that is going to be this one, called the Demon Wolf Twin. Basically, the wolfbow has 4 wolves. There is your default regular white wolf. There is the red wolf that you do when you use your wild call. There is the blue wolf, the Demon Wolf Twin, that only come in every 40 seconds, and you don't really know when it's going to come in unless you keep track of the 40-second timer in your head. And finally, there's the yellow Phantom Wolf. If you're trying to maximize your damage on the Beast Tamer on the Wolfbow, you want to ideally line up all 4 wolves during your burst as much as possible so that you can take advantage of all your buff, your rotation, and stuff like that. So therefore, I'm going to be showing you a perfect rotation on how to do that, and this is listed in the Google Doc step by step. Let's do a demonstration on the Wildpack Marksman rotation. Start by casting your 2 Imagi, Wild Call, Focus, enter overdrive with Storm Arrow, and spam Storm Arrow until it hits 0 stacks. You want to cast Lumi Arrow when you have 0 photon stack to re-enter overdrive again. But here you want to make sure to cast your Arrow of Rain as well as Torrent Valley to extend the overdrive situation so that you're able to get to 13 Torrent stacks when the situation ends. So here, if you do it right, you should add exactly 13 stacks here, and then outside, cast your Arrow Rain off cooldown to get back to 120 photon so that you can re-enter overdrive. Entering overdrive here, we're not going to cast Torrent Valley this time to end at 19 Torrent stacks, and then coming out, we're going to do the same thing. So right here, cast Arrow of Rain. And you'll see that your focus cooldown should line up exactly as you're about to enter overdrive again. So cast focus, enter overdrive, Torrent Valley to extend when you're under 70 stacks or so. And if you have done everything correctly so far, this will end exactly at 30 Lumi stacks so that you can recast your Lumi Torrent, get back to 120 stacks, and then pump your Storm Arrow again. You should end at 6 Torrent stack here if you have done everything correctly. So cast your Arrow Rain to get to 120 stacks faster, and you want to re-enter your overdrive here. Gameplay here is pretty straightforward. Enter overdrive, cast Torrent Valley before you cast Wild Call so that you don't get the Eagle to refill your photon stacks. And if you're doing it correctly, you should end at 17 stacks right here. Ending at 17 stacks, Arrow Rain. Now, something to be careful of here is you want to turn off auto and make sure that your Torrent Valley is off cooldown before, or about to be off cooldown before you enter focus again. So Alt and cast your double Imagi again. Then here on, you can cast, you can go into your overdrive again. Torrent Valleys, Arrow of Rain. If you have done everything correctly, more or less, you should end at exactly 30 stacks again here, which lets you cast Lumi Torrent, going back to 120 stacks and entering overdrive again. And from here on, you're going to end at 6 stacks right here. Once again, gameplay is very straightforward. You just want to repeat what I have done when you're at 6 stacks and you're good to go. Gear-wise, you can follow this chart to get a general idea on how to build mastery and haste and versatility on your gear. In terms of gem, obviously we're going to go for the Amber Agility, which also provide mastery as well as agility. For purple line, always prioritize agility on your armor piece if possible. However, for accessories, the one you want to prioritize is actually going to be attack speed to hit that 46% attack speed breakpoint. Otherwise, you can do like attack or boss damage. The reason why attack speed is the main one to prioritize is because the haste conversion to attack speed has a diminishing return, while more like building haste for the purpose of attack speed has a diminishing return. As a result, you always want to prioritize flat attack speed from like gear, from like modules, because they are not subject to diminishing return the same way haste is to convert to attack speed. So the same thing is going to go for our module as well. In modules, there is 2 main focus you want to always hit first: crit focus and attack speed bonus. Attack speed bonus at level 6 gives 6% attack speed, and I already just talked about why attack speed bonus is good. Crit bonus is good because the crit bonus give crit damage and only give crit damage. It doesn't give crit rate, which is a useless stat that we don't want, but it does give crit damage, which is a very, very useful stat that we want. The rest really come down to RNG, just straight depend on what your module look like. Module is extremely RNG, so just getting the crit focus and the attack speed focus is going to be your only main goal. Otherwise, if you do somehow is able to get really lucky and you can get an additional line, the recommended line is going to be either agility boost, elite strike, damage stacks, or agile. I know special attack has a thumbs up stat on the game, but as you can see, the special attack only boosts your special attack elemental damage by 12%, which is only for your storm arrow, so it's not that good because you really want to boost up the wolf damage instead, right? Likewise, as I've talked about, the game does not recommend building crit, but crit damage is going to be one of the most important stats you focus on. So definitely focus on getting crit to level 6 first before you look for attack speed. And then some of the other ones like probably agility boost, probably like elite strike, increase damage to elite or stronger enemy by 6.6%. And then if you can somehow get agile or damage stacks, they can be really good as well because they just give more damage. Be very, very careful of cast speed. Do not take the cast focus even if you can solid it in just for gear score, because we talked about so many times, cast speed is a negative DPS increase. If you ever somehow increase your cast speed by accident, you can potentially lose damage because of your torrent casting too fast. With this guy, I think you're ready to dominate your Pugs lobby with the Wildpack Marksman and just outdamage everyone else. If someone else outdamage you, just blame them for swiping and you're free to play instead. So yeah, so with that being said, if this video helped you out, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and as always, I do regularly stream on Twitch as well. So with that being said, thanks for watching. Bye bye.